And hopefully I won't have any more technical difficulties. So, what I'd like to start out with for today is a slight review of what we did last time. Last time we concentrated primarily on like body shape. Okay. So we did standing practice. We'll do a couple minutes of standing practice as a review. So have your feet shoulders width apart and your hands up. Okay. One fist width between. And we're only going to do a couple of minutes. Okay. So think about having your head up, your tailbone down, your back rounded, and your chest reserved, shoulders down and elbows down. So what you should feel is like a straight spine from the tip of your crown, the crown of your head, to the bottom of your spine, to where you sit. Okay. And the reason you want this straight shape is that it allows you to transfer your energy from your feet through your legs. It'll be controlled by your waist, and your energy will come out your fingers. So you should be able to feel the energy from your spinal cord out through your fingertips.
Now I have
And
to
that's why you round your back.
join the group. They're in the class.
Okay. Then we have only a few more seconds left, and then we'll relax. Okay. Hands down. Okay. Now, last time we did some work on stepping and getting your weight transferred. So let's do a real review of footwork, of how the two main stances, and certainly the only two you will have in the first section, which is bow stance and empty stance. So for bow stance, you want your feet shoulders width apart, which means the outside of your feet correspond to the outside of your shoulders. Okay. And when you have bow stance, what you're going to do is what is the same for both of these stances is the back foot is 45 degrees and the front foot is straight. And the difference has to do with the width. Okay. Bow stance, you have one foot 45 degrees and the front foot is straight, but it's shoulders width apart. For empty stance, what you're going to do is you're going to have one foot 45 degrees and the other foot is going to be one line, two sides. It's like two sides of one line. And it can be one of two kinds. It can be heel touch or it can be ball touch. So the other difference is for the bow stance, both feet have the entire foot on the ground. So when they say have your bubbling well touching the ground, your bubbling well never really touches the ground. Because if you think of this as your foot, your bubbling well is here. It's right behind the ball of your foot. Your ball of your foot touches the ground, but the bubbling well does not touch the ground. But they say that because they want you to emphasize that your whole foot touches the ground. So when you do a bow stance, to get into a bow stance, you turn the back foot 45 degrees, and then generally you put all your weight on the back foot, and you generally pull in the front foot slightly and step forward, and you go heel, ball, toe, bend knee. So if you were going to go on the other foot, you would turn. You're going to pull in the back foot slightly and step forward, heel, ball, toe, bend knee. So the reason you pull in slightly is that generally your starting position has your feet wider than shoulders width. So if you were starting from your opening position, your feet would be shoulders width apart. That's why when you do the first move, which is left forward off, you turn and you just put your foot forward because you were starting shoulders width apart. But if you are any wider than that, then you pull in before you step out. So that's the rule of thumb. Okay? And so let's do that a couple of times. Okay? We'll just do a couple of moves forward. Okay? So if you are at shoulders width apart, then one foot, doesn't matter which one, you move 45 degrees, and then you put all your weight on that foot, and then move it forward. And then you shift weight. Your second step, you shift back, you turn 45 degrees. When you turn 45 degrees, you are going to move your hips in the direction of that foot because that's going to be your plant foot. So you're going to turn and move toward that foot. Then you're going to pull in and step out because you were wider than shoulders width when you started. And then you shift weight. How do you shift weight? When I say heel, ball, toe, bend, knee, what happens is most people think of the front foot because that is describing the front foot. But actually, you're pushing off your back foot. So let me show you. So when I'm here, my hips are in the direction of what will be my plant foot. And then when I come forward, in order for my weight to go that way, I am pushing off the back foot in order to fill my front foot. So if you think of like a slinky, okay, you have your weight in the back, and then it goes to the front, okay? You're going to have one foot full, and then you're going to make the other foot full. And when you do this, you should feel as you push off the back, as more weight goes to the front, you should feel like your front foot is stopping your back foot. So if you move back and forth, you can feel this cushion support. So you're pushing off the back and the front foot supports. You're pushing off the front foot, the back foot supports. And this relationship gives you stability. And you need that stability because having 2 feet is not really that stable. It would be much better stability-wise to have 4 feet. But given that we don't, what we do is we utilize this push and support to try to compensate for that. So when you have 2 feet, you have a strong direction, which is this way. So if you pushed against me from this side, I have this back foot to resist you, right? But if you're pushing this way, I have nothing, right? So what I do is I use this in order to compensate and keep from going backwards. So there are 2 things that help compensate. One is what the Chinese call deng and cheng, which is the push and support. But the other thing that helps is your stance. When you do have a bow stance, what you're going to do is you have a lean. That lean helps you stabilize more. So not only do you have the push between your feet, but also you have this lean. And almost all bow stances use this lean. The only exceptions are, there are 3 moves that have basically a upright stance. And how do we compensate for that upright stance? We compensate for the upright stance by opening the hip. So here your hips are in the direction of the back foot. When you have an upright stance, you open it slightly. So that's what you do for, say, single whip or left ward off. You have this upright stance, and then your hips are slightly open to compensate for that. Okay. Are there any questions on that? No? Okay. So if we do a couple more, turn 45 degrees, hips go in the direction of there. Then you're going to move forward and push off the back foot and fill your front foot. Then you're going to shift back so that you can pivot on the heel. You pivot. Then you shift forward in the direction of what's going to be your plant foot. Pick up and set it down. Then you're going to move your weight, pushing off the back. Release the front, turn, move toward the front, come in, step out, and push off the back to fill the front. Okay? Any questions on that? So when you want to change direction from, let's say you're going this way. I moved here and I came forward. And I move here, I'm coming forward. If I want to change direction, instead of going forward. When I come back, I'm going to move this foot. You can't see. I'm going to move this foot so that it's parallel to the other foot. Then this becomes my back foot. I shift back, I pull in, I step out, and push forward. And this is what you're doing when you shift from left ward off to right ward off, right? So if I want to shift back, I come back, I put my feet parallel, I make all my weight on the right, and I step out. So that's how you do changes for 90 degrees. The more difficult change is, suppose I'm going one way and I want to go 180 degrees, as in single width. So if I'm going this way and I want to go that way, what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to shift my weight back, but then this foot has to turn 135 degrees. And then when I shift back, I pull in and step out. So if we do it back the other way, I shift back, I turn 135 degrees, pull in and step out. Push off the back foot and fill the front foot. Okay, any questions on that? Okay. Now let's look at empty stances. When you did a bow stance, you know that the width is shoulders width. But how far forward do you step? How long is the stride? In other words, if I'm going this way, I know that it's shoulders width, but then how long do I step forward? And you step forward, your step forward is determined by how low you are. In other words, when you step forward, you can only step forward as far as you can go and still come back. In other words, if you step and you have to push to get back, then you're too far forward. Okay? So the determination of how far you can go is totally by how low you can go. So if I can go lower, I can step further forward. But if I'm high, I can only step this far. You see what I mean? So developing leg strength allows you to go low, to go longer. Okay, so lower and longer. And many of the exercises we do have to do with increasing your leg strength so that not only can you go lower and longer, but also so that your balance is better. Okay. And how do we help our stance and stride? We do that by increasing the flexibility of your hips. The reason is when you do a bow stance, when you do any stance in Tai Chi, what happens is if I have this 45 degrees my knee has to line up with my toe. When I put this foot forward, my knee also has to line up with my toe. So, what does that mean? That means my hips have to be flexible enough to keep both things lined up. So, most people, when they think of coming forward, and if they think about it, they think about lining up their front foot. But it's just as important to keep your back foot lined up. So you do not want to see this, okay? You want to have the back foot lined up as well as the front foot. So you should be careful of that, because if you don't do that, you will hurt your knees. So it's kind of something to do to be careful, okay? When you do an empty stance, people think of an empty stance, oh, because your feet are closer together, it should be easier. Yes and no. So if I have 45 degrees, okay, and I'm doing an empty stance, depending on how low I am, I step forward and I put my whole heel on the ground. Okay. So it's not, my bubbling well does not touch, right? Because my, only my heel is touching. Okay. So when I do this, I have 70% of the weight in the back and 30% in the front. So if I do it this way, you can see here. So the back leg is bent. See, I don't want it like this. I want it like this. Okay. The back leg is bent and the front leg is more straight. So that's another difference from the bow stance. The bow stance, the front leg is bent and the back leg is straight, Tai Chi straight. Okay. Now, the way you make the empty stance is when you turn your foot 45 degrees and you put your foot on the ground, you still have to come forward. You still have to put 30% on the heel of the foot. In other words, it's not empty. They called it an empty stance, but it's not empty. You have 30%. So it's easier for you to see here. So essentially, I touch and put 30%. And I also have a lean. Okay. This is not an upright stance. But my lean comes from my hips. So my back is still straight. But it's not like this. It's leaned forward, but from my hip crease. Okay. And that's how you control the weight. So when you crease, that puts that 30% in the front. Okay. So when you did a bow stance, you straightened out the back and put your weight in the front. In this one, you are an empty stance. You put your weight in the front by creasing. And why is that? Because you're transferring your weight by changing the shape of your stance. And you want to do it that way because you want to keep your center between your feet. So One of the things that's very important for Tai Chi is you want to keep your tailbone between your feet in both dimensions. So when I'm here, so it's more obvious for empty stance from bow stance. For bow stance, what happens is you have to work at keeping your tailbone between your feet because it's easy to get cocked. Okay. Once you do not keep your hips level, you will not have your tailbone properly between your feet. So keeping your tailbone level means that you have to have hip flexibility. Okay. Because if you're going to keep your tailbone level, keep your knees lined up with your toes, you have to have hip flexibility. So when you do an empty stance, you don't have to worry so much about tailbone being between your feet. It's automatically between your feet. What you have to worry more about is making sure that in order to get that 30% in front, you're shifting your angle. And that way, your torso is evenly between your feet in this dimension. You see what I'm saying? So why do we have ball touch and heel touch? What why would you choose one over the other? What are the advantages of one over the other? There are two factors to consider in movements in Tai Chi, and you're trading them off. Everything is yin and yang, right? So you're trading one thing off for the other. What are you trading off in this case? You're trading off stability and agility. If you are super stable, you're not very agile, right? I mean, it's hard for you to move if you're really rooted into the ground. So you want agility, but you don't want to be so agile that you're off balance, right? So when you have ball touch versus heel touch, so I'll show you a ball touch. Ball touch, you essentially have the ball of your foot touching the ground, as opposed to the heel of your foot touching the ground. So what happens here is that usually your empty stances tend to be a little bit shorter than your bow stance. Because when you do a bow stance, you're moving more weight to the front. So you can have a longer, it feels like a longer stance. Whereas when you have an empty stance, you have most of your weight still in the back. So then you feel like you can't step as far out because you can't come back. So step as far out as you can and still come back. And you also notice that when you have your heel touch, your toe is further forward than when you have your ball touch. You'll see that one is more comfortable than the other. Also, if you try ball touch and heel touch, you'll feel that the heel touch feels more stable than the ball touch. So when you have the heel touch, it feels more rooted than the ball touch. And that's where the trade-off comes. When you have the heel touch, you have more stability. When you have the ball touch, you have more agility. So if you want to do quick changes of direction or something like that, then you would more likely use a ball touch. Whereas if you are, for example, executing split energy, you want the heel touch. So raise hands. When you're coming together, you will feel that your energy, you need that stability in order to come together. And more often than not, when you come together, you will use a heel touch. When you are separating, you're more likely to use a ball touch. And part of it is when you're doing a separating move, your ball touch is only for positioning. So, for example, when you do white crane, okay, the hands, one up, one down, kind of balance off each other, right? And your foot is there just for positioning. Whereas with the other one, you're really rooting it in order to come together. So try them out and you will see that one feels more rooted and one feels more like a positioning step. When you have an empty stance, you are also, because you are not shoulder width apart, you are more directional. So what happens is that you will use, when you have a bow stance, if you do a sequence of bow stances, okay, like here, and you come here, you find that you cannot go as far forward because your shoulder width is limiting your forward direction. Now, the shoulder width gives you more stability, right? So if you want to move more quickly forward, you would step one line, two sides. So you would use something like the Qigong walking I showed you last week. So when you're stepping like this here, so here you're one line, two sides. And if I go forward with another empty stance, I'm here. I am moving faster in that direction when I'm stepping one line, two sides. So for all of our transition steps, we use one line, two side stepping. In when you did walking straight for from bow stance to bow stance, you came forward and you release the front foot. You move your, sorry about that. You moved your weight back in order to release the front foot so you could turn it and make it your back foot. So you came in, you stepped forward, and you pushed off the back in order to give 60% to the front. When you do one line, two sides, and you're doing empty stances going forward, let's say you're doing empty stance, heel touch. All you would do here is you would just turn and then step, heel touch. Turn, and then step, heel touch. If you're doing ball touch and you are stepping forward, ball touch. What you have to do is you're going to have to pick it up, make it a heel touch, and then turn it. Okay. So if you're in a ball touch and you want to keep going forward on ball touch, you have to change it to heel, turn it, and then make your ball touch. So go to the heel, turn, and then make your ball touch. Any questions on that? So think in terms of where your energy is going. What direction are you going? When you make a bow stance, generally speaking, with one major exception, you are going forward. Okay. And that's why you have 60% in the forward leg, because you're going forward. When you're in an empty stance, you only have 30% in the forward leg. And why is that? It's that your energy is not primarily going forward. You're going to have up and down, out and in, but not primarily forward. Even something like high pattern horse, which is an empty stance, what happens is you have one hand pulling back when the other hand is going forward. So you do not have an all forward kind of movement. So you just doing it positionally. When you're doing it forward, let's say you have high pattern horse, but when you come to palm thrust and you are going forward, you change it to a bow stance, right? So if you have to think of where am I going? You know, how am I balancing out my energy? Out, in. So in, generally speaking, you're going to be on a heel touch. Out, you're generally going to be in a ball touch. Does that make sense? So one of the things that we have to work on is making good transitions. And the reason that transitions are important is that you want to maintain your stability while you're doing transitions. So the end move is easy to think of as, you know, this is a stable place to be. But getting there, you have to think of how are you moving? And is my body shape consistent throughout that movement? So if my if I am cocked in one way or the other, what will happen is that I will lose stability. So I want to maintain this reference posture throughout the whole movement. So, you know, one of the exercises people do is if you, by keeping your hands forward, you remind yourself to keep your back rounded, your shoulders down, and your head up. Because what happens is this, by putting yourself in this shape, from here up, you're going to stay stable and you're only going to move your legs. And you're going to try to keep the same height. Once you go into left ward off, that is the height that your form should be at. So how do you do that? So let's say that you're here, okay? In order to stay at the same height, you have to take it all up in your legs, right? And that is true in all the moves. And it's not just in bow stance. It's true even in sideways stepping. So let's say you're in cloud hands. You see, my head is at the same height the whole time. I'm not going up and down, right? So that is how you maintain both your stability and agility. Because if you maintain your height by bending your knees slightly, you are much more stable. But also, it gives you the ability to change direction much more readily also. So I want you to keep that in mind. Okay? Any questions?
I just want to know how you bend how far down you bend your knees.
Whatever is comfortable for you. In other words, okay, think about, you know how far you can bend down in the sense that let's say that you do a squat. Okay. I mean, you can squat down pretty far probably, but you don't want to stay there. Like if I squat down, okay, I don't want to stay down here because I can't move around very well, right? So you want to just bend enough so that you can put all your weight and move your other foot. Okay. How are you comfortable just moving your other foot? There are exercises for that also, but a couple that I would like you to think of is if you do not have very good balance, hold on to something, let's say a chair or something like that. And I want you to try to open your hips because that will help you squat down. It'll help you keep your balance. So here's the exercise. Just make a circle with your knee. And hold on. And then do it with the other side. Being able to do that will help you line up your knees with your feet, right? Because it opens up your quad. The other thing that you want to do is you want to maintain your ability to move at a given height. Okay. So when you're here, you want to be able to move forward and keep your knees aligned. You see, my knee is aligned with my toe, and it's also aligned with the back one. So think about just bending a little, whatever's comfortable. Okay? You're going to bend a little, turn, and then can you shift weight and release this foot to go forward? If it's a little, that's fine. If you have more strength, you can stand lower down and reach further forward. So just give it a try. Everybody's different. So you have to work within your own limitations and don't go further than like 70%. In other words, don't think that, oh, I really want to be, be able to like squat down or whatever, Don't think of it that way. Think of doing what's comfortable for you. It's much more important that you have good form. Okay? I want you to keep your knees lined up with your toes. That's much more important than being able to step out really far. Okay? Are there any questions? Did it all make sense? Okay. I don't know what's wrong with my video. Okay, so if there aren't any questions, we're going to close class. I apologize for my technical difficulties, and we'll work on moving next week. Okay, we'll work on using your hands. Okay, because you want to work on your feet, your body shape, your waist to move, your hands, and your gaze. Okay, so we're going to work on hands next time and how to move your hands and your body. Okay? So thank you very much for coming to class and for being patient. 同学们再见。
老师再见，谢谢老师。
不客气。